Hello, welcome to the West Ham Way YouTube. Myself, Mark Carlaw, and today I'm joined by Mr. Sam Delaney, who is a writer, he's a broadcaster, he's also host of the West Ham Way's very own Patreon podcast, U Irons. Sam, before we get into the football side of things and start on West Ham and what have you, I just want to ask, how are you, mate, and how's your summer been so far?
I'm very well, thanks. I've had a great summer. Just got back from a nice week away in North Wales, where we were lucky enough to have lots of sunshine. I can recommend it. It's one of the most beautiful places I've ever been anywhere in the world, let alone the UK. It was honestly absolutely breathtaking place. So I really enjoyed that, and I've been away here and there at other places over the summer. And now just back. I like autumn coming in though, because I don't know about you, but I feel like autumn for me is how I picture the football season. That for me, that is the natural home of football. Right. Summer, the first couple of home games at London Stadium, I turned up in just shorts and a t-shirt, right? And you're seeing people walk around in slides like they're just off the beach. And it's kind of nice, but you think this doesn't feel like proper football yet. It feels like a pre-season friendly. This isn't proper football. And then when it gets very dark and cold, like between sort of like November and February, that's just some games are just a nightmare. You're in actual physical pain being at the game, even in your biggest coat, right? But autumn, September, October, for me, when there's just a bit of steam coming out of your mouth when you're talking or breathing, and you start busting out your autumn and your winter coats. I love it. I absolutely love it. And
hopefully finding that lost 20 quid, you know what I mean? That's what you're hoping when you pick up those
coats, from last year. So I'm bang up for it. I can't wait for Newcastle on Sunday, because I feel, for me, the football season really gets going when we get into the autumn months.
Well, I hope it bloody does, because we kind of need to at the moment, the way things are going. They better be decent months, I think, especially this season. But I do know what you mean. There's I don't mind a bit of autumn, really. And I don't mind the fashion of it, getting the coats out again. You know what I mean?
I think most football fans of our sort of generation love big coat weather. It's our natural style, the big coat look.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly. Well, I'm quite small as well, so I kind of need a big coat to sort of make me some, give me something.
Bulk yourself out.
That's it. Yeah, exactly. No, it's good, mate. Before we go into where we're doing at the moment, West Ham. Wanted to take you back, mate, in terms of you becoming a West Ham fan. How did that come about?
Well, it's a strange one, because I'm actually from West London, and my local club was Brentford. In fact, I grew up on the estate that is more or less like part of what Griffin Park was. It was like Griffin Park was so close, it was almost part of the estate. But no one I knew supported Brentford, really. I mean, there was obviously Brentford fans on the estate, but I didn't have any mates at school or anything who did. Mind you, I didn't have many mates. There weren't many people at my school who supported West Ham to begin with, but I had a neighbour who was my best mate, a lad called Alex Jones, and I spent a lot of time at his house. And he had a dad called Malcolm Jones, who was from East London and was a huge West Ham fan. And this was around the time of, Brooking and Bonds. And when I was 5, West Ham won the cup. And, this family from next door were massive Hammers fans. And then one day, Malcolm took us to Upton Park. And I was just hooked after that. And I had, my dad wasn't about. So I didn't have that influence, of my dad sort of imposing a team on me. But I did have 3 older brothers. But one supports Spurs, one supported QPR, who were sort of a fairly local team, and the other one supported West Ham for the same reason as me. I think he was under the influence of this family from next door, and we just got hooked. And I always say, once you went to Upton Park as a kid, it was like no other experience of going to football. There's something about it, and you got hooked because there was an exciting sort of menace about the place, I think. And then we started school, and we kind of recruited some other kids to be West Ham fans with us, even though in our school everyone in those days supported Liverpool or Manchester United or Spurs. And soon, like, we had a few dads who'd like take us along, and we started going. I was lucky in that I had other mates' dads who would take us when we were quite young. If it was someone's birthday or whatever, in the days when it was much easier to get into the game. And then but I just stuck with it. I just caught the bug, and I think a lot of it was to do with Upton Park, with the experience going to Upton Park. And then me and my one lad, Alex Jones, sort of our friendship fizzled out, and he stopped going to West Ham so much. But I met another friend through the same connection, and we started going first with his dad, and then when we were about 13, we started going all the way over there on our own, which was 26 stops on the district line. And now we've never stopped going. We've had season tickets with each other for years, and now we both go. And my little boy, who's 10, comes as well.
Oh, nice, yeah.
And that's basically the brief outline of my West Ham supporting career.
No, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. Yeah, no, it's interesting that, mate. And also because what's interesting as well, it's quite good to know that because you're becoming quite well known now, especially with some probably newer fans, let's say, or people that probably weren't so familiar with you because obviously of what you're doing now with Patreon and obviously the U Irons podcast. How did that come about, the U Irons, in terms of how was that born and also how much are you enjoying doing it?
Well, it's been going for a few years and it's had various different sort of lives. How it first came about was it was commissioned by The Athletic, the sports website, The Athletic. Yeah. So I, for many years, was a presenter on Talk Sport. And one of the guys who used to be a producer, one of my producers, when The Athletic launched, he left along with a few other people from TalkSport. They kind of got recruited by The Athletic, who came over from the States with a bunch of money to recruit people. And he was made like head of podcasts. And he approached a few different people who he knew from TalkSport and said, right, whatever, you're a United fan. I want you to do our United podcast. You do our Arsenal. And he came to me, he said, will you do a West Ham podcast? I've got another podcast that's got a pretty sizable audience. It's quite a successful podcast called Top Flight Time Machine, which is more of a sort of it started out as a football nostalgia show. Now it's hard to explain. It's just sort of like comedy, really. It's just a couple of weird middle-aged blokes, me and my mate Andy, who's a Sunderland fan, talking shit. Anyway, for some reason, and I can't work out why, it's a big podcast with big audience. So The Athletic saw that and thought, oh, Sam's got a big podcast audience. Let's try and get some of it over here to us. So I started doing New Irons. I knew Rashane Thomas, who's their West Ham correspondent, because he actually used to be like work experience years ago on Talk Sport. So I met him years ago. He used to do the phones when I was doing a show. He was the guy who answered the phones and vetted you before they put you online to make sure you weren't going to swear or go mental. So I knew him from then. But then I hadn't seen him for years. By the time I met him again, he'd gone up in the world. He'd become, their West Ham correspondent. So I didn't know it'd go down, like how we'd work together. But we got on straight away. We worked pretty well together. He developed as a broadcaster really well. And we loved doing it. But after a year, we were being paid by The Athletic. I was being paid. He's on a salary anyway. I was being paid by The Athletic to do it. Yeah. And then after a year, they were like, we're cutting all our podcasts other than basically the big clubs that have got a global audience. So I think they cut pretty much. They had one for pretty much every Premier League club, right? And then they slimmed it right down to like United, Liverpool, maybe City. I don't know. Yeah. So I was like, oh well, never mind. It was fun while it lasted. But then the season started last season, and me and Rashane just had basically dropped the whole thing. But we got a lot of people on Twitter saying, where's it gone? Why can't you start it again? So I called The Athletic. I said, look, I'm going to start this podcast again. Do you mind if we use the name? Yeah. And it had originally been U Irons with a U, the letter U. Right. Irons. Right. And they were like a bit funny because Americans, if you've worked in the media, whenever you cross paths with Americans, they can be very uptight about things like what they call intellectual property. Right. So I said, fine. Do you know what? If you're going to be funny about it, I'll just change the name to U Irons and spell the word U, right? Like it, yeah. So I did that and we relaunched it. And then when we relaunched it, we brought a lad called George Poynton on board who Rashane had just met through Twitter because he's got a very popular, funny Twitter account. He works as a primary school teacher and he basically asks his like little year ones and twos funny questions like, what would you do if you won the lottery? Or who do you think should be the new prime minister? And then he just posts threads on Twitter of their funny answers. And it became very, very popular. And he's, got 50, 60,000 followers. But it turns out he's a West Ham fan. And he liked our podcast. And he said he wanted to come on. So he came on once. And we thought he was such a laugh and a good bloke. We just started having him on every week. So there was the three of us.
Yeah.
But it wasn't really making any money, but we were doing it as a labour of love because me and Rashane had just, when we had a little break, we just missed being able to just chat about West Ham every week. As you know, it can get very, it's nice to do this sort of thing.
It's
like
kind of like a
now.
therapy, isn't it? Like, you know what I mean?
It is
I treat it
actually.
as a bit of work, but actually I can unload. I feel like I can vent on here and then I can go back to my family. I'm like, yeah, I feel a bit better for that now. I
Yeah,
haven't
and
got to
to
sit
other
there
people
seething.
who understand. I mean, unless it's other West Ham fans who feel as passionately as you do, no one can understand why you're so angry on Saturday about that VAR decision. No one can relate.
Oh,
So a
don't.
forum like this is great. So we carried on doing it. It was great. And then I'd known X a little bit for a while because I used to get him as a guest on my show on TalkSport.
Right.
And so I knew him that way. And then, and I'd always been a fan of their pod. I've listened to it for years. So I did my own West Ham, but I always listened to their pod, really liked it back from the days when it was on Phoenix FM. And then they invited me on as a guest in the summer, on just as a guest, a bit like what we're doing now.
Yeah.
And we all got on like a house on fire. And then Dave said, why don't you bring it over? And I thought, well, what they're doing with the West Ham way, I've worked in the media and run various different media brands and entertainment brands over the years. And I was really impressed by what they were doing, is that their background wasn't in that, but what they were building was something that was as impressive as any kind of big money media brand that I've ever been involved in over the years. And, and I thought it's really smart what they're doing, because they're building just a great editorial thing. People thought it was just about transfer gossip or whatever, but it was so much more than that. And I thought, this is brilliant. They got a really good community, and it felt like a better home. And there was more resource. There's a little bit of resource for us to do it. And I just think that when we did it with The Athletic, the audience weren't that engaged. So we were being paid, but they weren't that engaged. Then when we started doing it just independently off our own bat, it was good. But what we got by joining up with the West Ham Way was a really passionate, enthusiastic, and engaged audience.
Yeah.
And that's a great motivator, because when you're making content and you see you're getting feedback from people and you're starting conversations with West Ham fans, it's really, you get a buzz out of that and you get a real sense of fulfillment. So that's how the whole relationship came about. And so far it's going really great. I'm loving it.
I'm glad you are, mate. To tell you what, it's been brilliant. I'm a patron myself, so I always keep up to date with bits and pieces going on. So when it came about, I was quite intrigued straight away with it, and obviously I know of you anyway. I'd already sort of known about yourself, so I was really intrigued with it. But yeah, I think it's great, very, very popular. So yeah, I always look forward to it.
I mean, I've been buzzing from the feedback on the Patreon. It's great. And, in some ways you think, well, you're narrowing down the audience because it's not available to everyone. It's only to subscribers. Yeah. But quality of audience is better than quantity for me. Do you know what I mean? People who think are really listening to it, really engaged, giving you feedback, much better than feeling that you've got kind of a larger audience who aren't really kind of not really listening to the whole show or anything like that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. I completely agree. Mate, you touched on it already, and we kind of I didn't really want to touch on this, but I knew I had to. VAR against Chelsea, the decision. Firstly, mate, what's your take on all of this, and how bad was that call by the officials?
Well, I've never wanted to be a conspiracy theorist in any capacity. I worked in news journalism for years, and people would often say, come up with all sorts of like conspiracies about the way in which the media worked and misinformation and how it was spread and the way that journalists worked. And I just was so cynical about that, because I thought, listen, I've worked at the coalface of this for years, and you're imagining stuff. The truth is much more boring about, the way in which information is gathered and then communicated to the masses. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
people just don't have the time, resource, or often the intelligence to bloody do anything cunning with what they're telling you. They're just regurgitating shit all day. Anyway, so I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I wasn't until the weekend, because I have started to think now, it was such a weird, it's so weird to think that every single person in the stadium, apart from a couple of disingenuous dickheads like Tuchel, who's now got the boot anyway, so we haven't got to worry about him, everyone could see that decision was wrong. Everyone, right? And and yet it just happens anyway, and there's nothing you can do, and you have to shrug it off. And even if they come back afterwards and say it was a mistake, it makes no difference whatsoever. Chelsea keep the 3 points, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And I thought I've always thought, I was thinking, there's such a huge amount of money in the Premier League as a product that is sold around the world, right? That it can't, in any other business, you wouldn't allow all the variables that football has. That the beauty of football is that anything can happen, and David can beat Goliath on any given moment, which is a nightmare for people who have got millions of pounds riding on share values, right? Because they want to be able to buy an entertainment brand that they know is going to deliver a return. And I compared it, this is not the best analogy, but I'll try it again anyway. I compared it the other day to someone who's like, I said, imagine if like Marvel were investing in a new Avengers film, right? And they were going to put millions into it, but they told their shareholders that however much they put into it, they'd triple that with the returns they'd get at the cinema. But what they wouldn't do is go, well, we've hired a bunch of actors and we've got them their costumes and we've got some cameras, but we're just going to turn the cameras on and see what happens, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you got a script? Nah. Have you got a director? Nah. We're just going to let it happen organically. We think it's more interesting that way. Let them ad-lib, right? You must be mad. How can you possibly control the outcome of this if you're just going to let it happen? And I think that football's become such a huge product that's worth so much money to so many people.
Yeah.
They can't. And then on our podcast this week, George Poynton made a really good point, right? He made a couple of really good points. One was he said, there is more money spent on 3 p.m. Saturday kickoffs in the Premier League than any other sporting event in the world, right?
Right, okay.
In terms of gambling, right? There's more bets made. And on those 3, and there are the highest proportion of iffy decisions every season take place during 3 p.m. Saturday kickoffs, right?
Right.
Because they're not on TV, which means the crowd in the stadium don't get that immediate knowledge that something's gone wrong or VAR's made an incorrect call, right?
Yeah.
So it seems to me that if all these millions of pounds are being spent on these 3 p.m. kickoffs, but you've inserted someone into the mix who is basically an unaccountable, pretty much anonymous figure in a room elsewhere who can just intervene in the game at any point and change the outcome, right? That's a gift for corruption and gambling syndicates. It's a gift. And you start to think, maybe that's why VAR was introduced, because someone somewhere said, we can't allow all of this, the arbitrary nature of football to continue anymore. There's too much money riding on it. And so I think that, and the other point George made was just that the value of the Premier League in terms of the money they were able to sell it as a product to global TV companies has never been as low as it was the season that Leicester won the league. Right?
Oh, do you know what? Yeah, I was thinking that.
Leicester winning the league cost the Premier League millions and millions of pounds because, the millions of viewers around the world need Manchester United and Liverpool to be winning the league because that's who everyone in the biggest markets in the world, from China to Brazil to India to Thailand, they're all wearing Liverpool Man United shirts. They don't want Leicester to win. They can't let it happen. They certainly don't want West Ham breaking into the top 4. So, I've basically become a conspiracy theorist. I've become David Icke.
I can understand it. But do you know what? When David Moyes took over at Manchester United and they had that kind of stuttering start, and obviously it was a big thing with Ferguson leaving and stuff, there was a quote from an official at the Premier League, and I don't know I'm not going to name the person because I don't know his name and I don't want to misquote him, but they said that Manchester United not defending their title correctly is not a good advert for the Premier League, and they need to be up there. And I'm just thinking, like, you look back at that, and at the time I probably didn't think too much of it, but now you're looking at it now and it just echoes what you're just saying there. It does feel that way. It does feel that there are certain powers that be that don't want to see West Ham in the top 6. They don't want to see Leicester up there. It's not a good advert. And it is things like those decisions like that one we had on Saturday does make you sort of swerve that way, thinking, I mean, I'm with you, mate. I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, and I don't want to feel that is definitely the case, but it's getting to a stage. Well, actually, the best question is really, let's just flip it. If West Ham are winning 2-1, and Chelsea had scored a last-minute equaliser, would they have ruled it out had Mount touched Fabianski?
No.
I don't think in a million years they would even look at it.
As it went to VAR, I don't know about you, but as soon as it went to VAR, you just knew. You knew what was coming.
Absolutely.
I didn't even get I wasn't even, there was no kind of tension while I was waiting for the decision because I knew what the decision was going to be. And as soon as they get sent over to the screen, for sure. So, yeah, and it's happened too many times now. It has happened too many times. And, people forget, but this isn't a wild fantasy that people fix games for money, because Juventus got caught for it and were relegated and spent years trying to work their way back up into Serie A. This is one of the world's most famous football clubs who'd been doing it for a long time, right? And so it's happened. This is not something that is speculative. This has happened. If it could happen there, it can happen anywhere. Absolutely. And usually these things happen where the money is. Do you know what I mean? And the money in world football, the big money is in the Premier League,
Yeah.
And so it's really frustrating. It's a bit depressing, really.
I
think last season our form collapsed so badly in the second half of the season that I don't think we were worthy of a place in the Champions League, right? And actually, I don't think we were worthy of a place in Europa League because we blew that. All we had to do was beat Brighton and we blew it. And so I think no wonder the squad's been overhauled to such an extent. Because I think, understandably, David Moyes was pretty angry and pissed off, right, that they'd played so badly for half a year. But I think the season before when Lingard was there, I think that we were a better team, actually, the season before last. And there were some very bad decisions. There were some really bad decisions in big games against United and Liverpool that cost us crucial points, And,
which would have got the Champions League, wouldn't it?
We would have got in the Champions League. There was a couple of decisions that stopped us getting in the Champions League. And I thought that was our big chance. And to be honest, even though we've obviously built a really impressive squad now, it might not come around again like it did 2 years ago, that we might never get that opportunity again.
No.
Who knows what will happen. We've got off to a bad start in this season. We certainly look like we've got the best squad we've ever had. Yeah. I mean, I've never seen a better squad than this on paper at West Ham.
No, I agree.
But,
and I agree, mate. You'd like to think now with the squad that we've got. I mean, I'd like to think we've still got another crack at it, and we are going to. But the problem is we're kind of reliant now on bigger sides to really flop. And when they've got the help of, like we've sort of established with VAR, it doesn't help at all. The fact that they seem to be getting these points from everywhere, they always seem to be favouring them. It's very frustrating. Talking of the Chelsea game, though, or talking of Chelsea, I should say, they've just sacked Tuchel, which you've just touched on. Graham Potter, I'm hearing that he's looking the favourite. I think he's even heading to London now for talks. Does this mean that we might actually finally beat Brighton?
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that angle, but I would hope so. Yeah, because but I do think that under Chris Hughton, we struggled a little bit. I think there was a couple of games in this run we've had over the last few years that were under Hughton, and they were very different under Hughton because they were quite a boring side under him. They were, but I think they still managed to get a couple of draws against us. So I don't know. Yeah, maybe it's just a minute block, but those things have got to be broken. Those hoodoos have got. The weird thing about it is that when they've beaten us, they've always deserved to beat us. It's not one of those ones that's they're bastards. They always trip us up or nick a game off of us. They don't. They just always beat us fair and square.
Well, this season they outclassed us, didn't they? Like, I mean,
absolutely.
We were second best.
Embarrassing. Absolutely embarrassing that was.
Mate, we've got a big game on Sunday, Newcastle. Is it fair to say that if we don't win on Sunday, David Moyes is going to be under pressure in his job?
I think, that is fair to say, because I think that, as you've seen with Tuchel, if you spend a lot of money, right, and people are debating whether or not those signings were Tuchel signings or the owner's signings, and people always have that debate about West Ham's transfer business as well. But either way, once that money's been spent, the manager is under a huge amount of pressure. So it's a bit like careful what you wish for as a manager, because all managers probably want money to spend to improve the squad. Yeah. But once you've had that money spent, the owners need a return on it, and they cannot hesitate if they think they're not going to get it. So he's under a lot of pressure, more pressure than he's ever been under, because before he was overachieving. Anything he did with that screen, he inherited a pretty two-bob squad, right, from Pellegrini, and he's overachieved by getting us to where we are, and he's way ahead of schedule where any of us thought we would be. But that was when he was just operating with the odd signing here and there. But, we were second or third biggest spenders in world football this summer. And therefore, I think they can, those first 3 defeats, you think, okay, wobbly start, the squad hasn't quite settled yet. But football is brutal. And I think he's one of the best. I think he's the best manager we've had since John Lyall. But I know that, so I wouldn't want to see him go. But there is a reality. And if we lose against Newcastle, I don't think that'll be it. It'll be gone.
No,
that will start murmurs. If you tune into TalkSport on Monday morning and we've lost to Newcastle, that will be one of their lead stories.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Sure,
I agree.
Moyes under pressure, and I'm sure David Moyes knows that. So it is a massive game. It's a massive game, and it'll be interesting to see what sort of side he picks, because he's got to make his mind up. He's dithering. He's got all these players in, and he's dithering about what his best lineup is. He's dithering about whether to take a chance on the new lads. But if he goes again with the same team that basically looks more or less like last season's team, that could bite him on the arse.
I agree. I mean, I don't know. He seems quite a shrewd bloke, Moyes, and I don't think he's necessarily panicking or anything like that. I think he realises we've got a good squad, and let's be honest. Although we've got 4 points from 6 games, I think that's really harsh. I think we should have beaten Spurs realistically. I think we cocked that up, and I think we talked about Chelsea. We well deserved a point there. I think we're very unlucky against Forest as well. So I think if we had got those results, I think we'd probably be sitting mid-table, maybe even the top half quite comfortably.
Yeah, that's true. But the thing is, all West Ham fans have seen it start like this. Like sometimes you go down like the Avram Grant season because you're just absolute rubbish, right? And and that's it. There's no two ways about it. You've gone down because you're a rubbish team and you deserve to go down, right? Yeah. But sometimes you actually look like a decent team and you have a bit of bad luck. But before you know it, there's been a run of games and then something changes in the mentality because players suddenly get negative, nervous. They start playing nervously. You get divisions in the dressing room and that's it. If you have too much of a run of bad luck at the beginning of the season, it can set the tone. So I think you're right that it's been unlucky, but that doesn't mean that we'll necessarily turn it round. And that's why Sunday's such a big game, because it's not an easy game. There aren't really any easy games, but home to Newcastle, and now he's had these players for a while now. These new players, he should have a good idea of what his best team is. He's had time. He needs to step up, pick a strong team, have them playing for him. And to be honest, even a draw would be pretty disappointing. And that's no disrespect to Newcastle. They've got a good. They signed that Isaac player who's an absolutely brilliant son. I thought he was mustard in the Euros last year. They're obviously a good side, but we've got to win this.
We have. By hook or by crook, we've got to win it. I mean, and it's quite interesting when you talk about this season because it's a strange one, obviously with the World Cup, and I don't know that might actually serve us a bit of a favour. The fact we started badly, if we can get going and then we've got a break, it might help us out a little bit, have a bit of a breather, going away for the World Cup and then coming back. It's effectively like 2 seasons, isn't it? It's a bit of a strange one. I wonder if that'll help us out. Sam, before you go, I've got to ask you the question then. Sunday, what's the score going to be?
I think it'll be 2-1 West Ham.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be tight. And I think at the moment our defence will always concede. I mean, I thought we played great against Chelsea defensively for like an hour, and then we gave away 2 really soft goals. So there's something not quite right. I think it might be time for Fabianski to be dropped. I don't think Zuma's at his best yet. So that's my worry. But I hope that he plays, obviously, Paqueta. I hope that he plays. I would like to see him play both Scamacca and Antonio and just to go for it. And I think we've got no choice but to like fire at them right from the get-go. And let's get Paqueta on the ball and see what he can do. Because he hasn't done anything magical yet in the games we've seen him, but he doesn't look like he's a player who's going to let you down. Sometimes you get these like flair players who on their day, like you look at a Ben Rama, on their day, they might create something magical and win you a game. but when they're not feeling it, they'll kind of be a passenger. Paqueta is a warrior. You know, he's a flair player, but he will fight and he will run. And we saw him do that against Chelsea. I was quite impressed by that. But this is the game where I think Moyes should be like, get this bloke on the ball, let him be the sort of engine of this of our team, and let him connect with our attacking players. And I think if he does that, we can beat them, but it'll be tight.
Yeah, I agree. I've actually gone for 1-0, so pretty similar to yourself. I think I think we'll win it, but I agree. I think it's gonna be a tight game. Like you say, it'd just be nice to see some of these, as you say, new players on the ball and get them introduced now and see what they can do. But I'm optimistic. I think we'll get a result, but it's gonna,
I think Cornet certainly did enough on Saturday when he came off the bench to deserve a start. You know, Burnley fans, I think, are astounded that he's sitting on our bench. You know, they rate him extremely highly. And every time I've seen him, but particularly against Chelsea, he looks like a ball of energy is going to create something. But I don't at all think that Moyes is going to pick him on Saturday. I just don't. It's just not Moyes' style.
Good argument there for him as well, especially over Bowen, who hasn't started great. I think could be.
Yeah,
I'd like to see him play.
Within moments, he hit the post with a header, which actually he should have scored. It was easier to score, but I think it was his first touch of the ball. And then moments later, he scored. You know, we haven't really talked about. No one's talked about it because it was all overshadowed by the controversy of VAR. But it was a great finish. It was amazing, a great, difficult finish. And I think you know, over Bowen or maybe even over Benrahma or Fornals, he deserves a crack for sure.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. Fingers crossed, mate. Fingers crossed this Sunday. We get a decent result. Sam, mate, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for coming on. And I hope we can do this again soon. Obviously, I'll be listening to your show on Patreon.
Cheers, Mark. It's been a real pleasure. And I'd love to do it again sometime. Take it easy. Come on, you irons.
Excellent, mate. Take care. Cheers, mate. Bye.
Cheers.